welcome to this exciting panel discussion as part of the second edition of the KNX Book Factory newsletter. It's a pleasure to have you all here today. And while our executive director couldn't join us, I'm thrilled to step in and welcome you to what promises to be an insightful and impactful session. So, as we delve into the theme, navigating the book trade in Africa, we're privileged to have booksellers from across the continent with us today, representing all five regions. This panel will explore key areas such as distribution channels, reader engagement, and sustainable business practices, topics that are vital to the growth and future of the African book industry. At the KNX Book Factory, our mission is to spotlight and celebrate the publishing world across the continent through articles, interviews, essays, and resources like this webinar. We aim to support businesses in achieving sustainability while tapping into the unique opportunities that exist within our book value chain. Welcome to everybody. I will hand over now to our moderator of the day, Mr. Kelechi Njoku. But before I do, I'm just going to give a brief intro. So Kelechi Njoku is an editor and fiction writer. He was the inaugural fellow of an Raja Nyoji Editorial Fellowship and previously senior editor at Kachifo Limited, an independent publisher. At Kachifo, he led efforts to expand the publisher's fiction list across multiple genres. As a writer, his work has appeared in Ada, Litro, and This is Africa, and he has been a participant in the National Center for Writing's Escalator program. With over a decade of editorial experience, Kelechi has collaborated with emerging and established writers and editors, shaping critical narratives and maintaining rigorous editorial standards. So thank you so much today, Kelechi, for moderating this, and I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Osas. I'm very excited to be here, and thank you for the very great introduction. Hi everyone. Hi Sewela. Hi Faith. Hi Wendy. Hi Mutesi. My name is Kelechi Njoku, and as Osas said, I am an editor and a writer as well. It's really lovely to have you all here. I wonder if you'd prefer for me to introduce you or you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Don't introduce us, I think.
All right. Okay, so just quickly, Sewela is an author and the owner of Book Circle Capital, BCC, which is an independent bookshop focusing on African literature in Johannesburg. She's a marketing manager in one of the leading financial services companies in South Africa, and her academic background spans from journalism, communication sciences, and marketing. She holds a master's degree in strategic marketing and consulting from the University of Birmingham, UK. Sewela is an avid reader and reviewer of local books for adults and kids. She facilitates book conversations with authors at BCC book fairs and on ETV's morning show South Africa. Sewela, thanks for joining us. Gasana Mutesi is a dedicated bookseller. She began her publishing career in 2010. She founded Arise Education in 2013, a bookstore in Kigali that quickly became a hub for book lovers. In 2014, she joined Oxford University Press to develop textbooks for Rwanda's new curriculum. In 2016, she launched Ubuntu Publishers to meet an unmet market need. Gusana is deeply involved in the daily art of selling books, producing children's literature, and educating communities on the importance of reading. She collaborates with various publishing and bookseller associations to promote the reading culture in Rwanda and beyond. She's an alumna of several prestigious programs and continues to support education and reading initiatives. Gasana, rather, thanks for joining us. Wendy Njoroge is the co-founder of Somanami Books, a Pan-African bookstore in Kenya. With over a decade of experience in building reading communities, she organizes the African Book Fair in Nairobi, which celebrates African storytelling from across the continent. As a publisher at Somanami Press, Wendy is committed to amplifying diverse African voices and bringing new narratives to global readers. Thanks, Wendy, for joining us. And Ade Dotun, who I believe is going to join us much later, is the co-founder and director of Roving Heights, a leading bookstore chain in Nigeria with locations in Lagos and Abuja, holding degrees in microbiology and public policy from Obafemi Awolowo University and the University of Oxford. He previously worked in business development in East Africa. He now serves as program manager at Nigeria Off-Grid Market Acceleration Program, supporting renewable energy initiatives around the country. So it's really, really lovely to have you all here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation as this live progresses. So I'd like us to just kick off directly by just my first question cuts to the heart of what you do. So I'd like to hear from each and every one of you. What inspired you to own and run a bookstore in your region? Ntesi, would you like to start us off?
Thank you very much. That was an interesting introduction. And seeing the people that are here, I'm so excited because they all carry a vast experience in what we are talking about today. So I won't play the expert, but I'll play. I always say that I'm a reader who loves reading. Well, I think I got into the publishing industry and the book sector by accident. I always tell myself that I'm an accidental entrepreneur, especially when it comes to books, because apparently, loving books as a young child and growing up with books has driven me to starting a bookstore. But I think it was not until I came in contact with one of the Kenya and Uganda's publishing industry that I took interest. And my interest was based on the fact that people were coming into Rwanda, be it the bookstore or publishing, they were coming in to actually get tenders. So they would come, get the tender from the government, and then go back. Then I started working for them. And I started meeting different people in different districts in Rwanda, in the north, in the south, because I was doing marketing and sales, definitely. And then people would be asking, where can I buy this book? Where can I get this book? Where am I going to get this book? So I decided to start a small bookstore in Kigali because there was a demand for the things that I loved, but I was not seeing. So reading, cultural stories. And then I started actually stocking books from the region. Then later I realized that parents were like, yeah, we are reading, but the names, the prices, they're not reflecting us. They're not reflecting, our own villages, our own. Yes, there's a similarity between, Rwanda and the rest of East Africa, but definitely language, names, places was a different flavor. So that is how I entered into publishing. After selling books for like 5 years, then I realized that people are looking for more. So to me, it was really more of the demand, but also the love for reading.
Sure. Thanks, Mutesi. That was really interesting. Sewela, what's your own experience?
My story is similar to Ms. Tessie with regards to it being an accident. I also came into it, actually my husband is the founder of the business. I came in more as a supporter, but then as we were going along, I realized that I have more passion and I want to carry it on. And the reasons to keep going, similar to the previous speaker, is there's a lack of, representation in the kind of content that my children were consuming, and also just children in general. Mainstream bookstores in South Africa are still very Eurocentric in their stocking of content, though it's slightly changing over the past few years because of this demand for decolonization of content. It has changed a bit. But yeah, I just wanted that space where we could celebrate and curate our stories, in South Africa and the rest of the continent. So that's the biggest driver, and that thing of making sure that, children see themselves in the content they consume.
Yeah, and that's really key. Wendy, do you mind sharing your own experience about getting into book selling?
Most definitely. First of all, thank you for that introduction. I'm so excited to meet some old faces and also some new faces. As a bookseller, I am always learning, and I think there's so much we can learn from each other. So how did I get into bookselling? So the business is between my partner and I. She's called Modoni, and we met in a book club. And during COVID, so the book club was very dedicated on reading from the African continent. And as the case would be, we're relying on bookstores in Nairobi to, make sure that they stock the books that we wanted. And mostly that was not received very well. So we'd have instances of maybe ordering from Amazon and, the likes. Because for some reason, they didn't think that people wanted to read those books. So during COVID, I think got frustrated and we said, how hard could it be to start a bookstore? Because we already knew we've been in this book club for a couple of years. We also know readers in Nairobi who are interested in African authors and the African diaspora. And so we started it as an online store because, we didn't have too much ambition about it. We thought we were just gonna keep a couple of books, diverse books, and we always say that our first stock was a copy or two of each book, because our reasoning was, should we start this business and then it goes bust, we will just retain those books as personal spending. And yeah, that was in 2021. And so far, we're now in 2024. We are no longer an online store only. We have an online store that serves customers across East Africa. We also have 2 branches in Nairobi. We also have some partnerships with some other retailers where we keep our books. We have 2 pop-up stores. So yeah, it's just been putting one leg in front of the other and seeing where the customer is leading.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Adedotun, you run a bookstore chain in Nigeria. So the question is, what inspired you to own and run a bookstore there?
I guess it started out of a deep love we all share in common with other panelists, right? We're all folks who are, we have more than a normal interest in books and reading, right? Because it takes a book lover to own a bookstore. I guess for me, that was really how I started. The biggest pain point was accessing, quality books from the part of town where I was living. And then trying to find, the books. And I remember when I started out alongside my sister, my wife, I used to tell them, even when we don't get anyone to buy, right, we share them out amongst our friends, right? So starting from that community of people who we also share that common affection and love for books, it sort of provided some initial level of security and comfort. And so we started first with helping self-published authors distribute their books. That first iteration of the business didn't quite pan out well because of issues relating to the creditworthiness of some of the authors that we're working with. And so we pivoted into using social media to sell books, to get books known, to stimulate interest, and then selling them. So people would send us messages on Instagram, which at some point became our biggest asset as a business. And then I realized that people wanted more than buying books virtually, ordering via Instagram or WhatsApp or websites. They want to build community around books. They want to have events. They want to touch the books before buying. So that was the first the first indication of the need for us to open a physical store, which we opened as far back as 2018. First store in some part of Lagos called Sule, and then. It was initially tough. I remember those days I would still count the number of books on the shelf, but with the goodwill and the support of the reading public, we've grown from being a dining room business to being one of the most recognizable book-selling brands in Nigeria.
Thank you, Adedotun, and it's lovely to have you here. So I think my next question is going to be about challenges, right? So what are the challenges you guys face in procuring books in your respective regions. I really like the fact that the first, you already touched on the difficulty of having these books and, even finding the kinds of books that African readers need to read. So I'm really curious what the key challenges are for you in procuring books in your respective regions and, that you think need addressing. Also, how do you navigate the complexities of sourcing these titles from local publishers and from across the continent versus importing international books? Who would like to kick us off? So
Who's the question directed?
everyone, actually. So every question is for everybody.
I could go first.
So I can take the question again. So challenges you face procuring these books, and also the challenges you face procuring books from local publishers as opposed to importing international books, right? Yes, Wendy, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. I think the challenges are there as well as the opportunities. But because you've asked about the challenges, I think what we were not prepared for and what we could not foresee is how much currency fluctuations, especially the forex, has had an impact on our business. And that directly impacts the ability of the customer to make purchase. It also fuels the black market, which is piracy. So over the last 2 years, I don't know about some other countries, but I suspect it's probably a similar trend. But the Kenya shilling has really, really lost value against the international, the dollar and the pound, which is where we get most of the English imports. Yeah. So that has had a really direct impact on the costs and the final consumer price. And we've seen that affect the final consumer basket. So you'd see somebody who would buy maybe 3 books at a go or 5 books at a go, reduce that to 2 because their spending power is still the same and they must fit that within that. So that's really been a recent challenge. We're still trying to figure out, how to show ourselves against such macroeconomic factors. But as a Pan-African bookstore, for us, Somanami, we're very keen on intra-Africa trade, and that comes with it a special set of challenges, and mainly it's distribution and logistic challenges. So in East Africa, that's not a big problem. Like I could get books from Mutesi overnight. So because there's a good road network connecting all the East African countries, so whether Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi. So pretty much between 24 and 48 hours, if you're shipping across, and you'll be able to get that. And because it's road, it's very reasonably priced. Now the problem comes in when I'm trying to get books from across the region, which is say Southern Africa or even West Africa. And given what the internet is, customers see these books and they see titles and they're like, oh, can I get this? Can I get this? When we check, it's probably published in Zambia. It becomes a nightmare to kind of get those books. So what has really helped in those circumstances is our network, our community network. For instance, we, maybe the authors that we're in contact with and people that can go out of their way to be book mules. So it's not uncommon for us to, have an author who's maybe flying for another business or for something else, bring us a stash of their maybe 20 copies because that's what they can fit in a suitcase. And that's how we sort of move along with that. So we do have a couple of situations where we're always asking. I think we do that a lot from South Africa because, again, shipping by air really impacts the cost of those books. So from Southern Africa, we happily use book mules. So mostly these would be authors themselves who have links and connections in East Africa, and they just bring us their books. For West Africa as well, we have been using, been tapping into our community, but also lately there's a growing there's always been a huge Nigerian population in Nairobi, but we've also been able to like tap into some of the informal shipping goods movement, yeah, because and also that's a bit it's also a question of trust. It's also a matter of trust because it's not like DHL, you have a tracking number. So usually it's somebody who is putting luggage in Lagos and then, they have spare capacity and they can, say, carry 50 books. And then you hope and trust that they will reach you when they get to Nairobi. So it's all kinds of interesting ways that we found to work around, those two challenges.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Dotun, do you mind sharing your experience?
Yes, thank you very much. So I think the challenges are myriad, and I'm sure that repeating some of them would amount to like re-echoing some of the sentiments shared by co-panelists. But I think the most notable one that we've seen is around financing. Some of the local publishers always have challenges around financing print runs, right? So that means they can only do limited print runs, and then you have to wait. And that means in a number of times, like the demand is then fueled by pirates, right? Because they can't, you can't meet the demand. There's also another challenge around, the dearth of distribution infrastructure in most parts of the continent. So, for instance, if I was going to buy a book from Penguin asked me to talk to the book service, right? They said a discount there, and then they said like they said the credit terms, whether you pay back after 90 days or 60 days. But you don't have that in Nigeria, right? The publisher is still the one who, wears the hat of the distributor. He's the one who chases like booksellers, for returns, and then that also limits the capacity to be able to focus on things that can stimulate interest and demand in their books. And this is different, vis-a-vis if you were buying foreign titles where, some of the authors already have a name brand. The distributors are already advancing new credit running into tens of thousands of pounds or dollars, and that's a very good opportunity for you to grow your business if there's demand. I just also want to dwell on the issue of pricing, right? I realize that in our own market, pricing is a big challenge, right? Even though comparatively, books in Nigeria are cheaper than in neighboring countries, right? I just got back from Nairobi and I was in horror of like how much the books cost because there's VAT on books, but you don't have VAT on books in Nigeria. And then it's oftentimes still hard to be able to get people to buy because of very limited disposable income. So there's a problem burden around the economics of when people who are interested in reading, they don't have the means, right? You can't, the minimum wage in Nigeria is 70,000 naira. Which is depending on what exchange rate you're using, a little less than $50, right? So if you just finished college and then you're participating in a national youth service program, you earn say there about $50. So and you come to a bookstore where they're selling original books like us, and an average paperback is now like 15,000-20,000 naira, right? Which is sort of like priced outside the reach of consumers. And so that's why there's a lot of recourse to like downloading PDF and pirated books. And I really wish that we get to the point where, economies improve and then, the people who are interested in books and reading, will be able to part with money to, to fund their interest, rather than just looking for pirated or bootleg versions of books.
Thanks for that. I mean, piracy is such a huge problem and a consequence of a lot of the challenges that we're discussing here. Gasana, can you share your experience around these challenges that Dotun and Wendy have spoken about?
Well, I think Wendy and me share a lot in common. The inflation, the accessibility to the especially West, South, North African markets. For East Africa, it's good, but I think for us we have two like special challenges as a bookseller. To me, we have the issue of the reading culture that is, I think, very rampant in the whole of the African, continent. Because reading equals to the number of books that can be sold. If a culture of reading is vibrant, and then you will sell more books. Therefore, this leads to books being looked at as optional commodities in the market. So making the book selling sector not to be what I can call a beautified business that you want to run into. So it's not a lucrative business. And to me, I think also the book selling sector is a little bit considered by so many financial institutions as a speculative business. It's not really easily identified by businesses, at least in my country, where you can go and get a loan. If someone went and say they sell a restaurant or they have this business for tourism, especially in Rwanda, you will get the loan as quick as possible. So the financial part of it is a challenge for me as a bookseller in Rwanda, because you don't access most of the financial products that are in the market, to me. And I think, I don't know for Kenya, if it is the same, or even Uganda, but for Rwanda, the culture of reading is low, access to financing, books are not yet seen as a product that can be bankable. I remember one of the bank guys came and was like, by the way, what do you say? I was like, books. He was like, books? Are you talking about exercise books and pens and pencils? I was like, no, I'm not a stationery shop. I am a bookseller. So it's really at that level that we are still struggling even to make the business to become something that people would feel like it's a business. Most of the people, even when you go to our avenue, they're like, books, how do you ship books? How do you bring books? So that one is one side of the coin, reading culture and not having any financial product that is in the market. But now it also comes to the prioritization, or in terms of the policy. I think when we are talking about an African book market, we should be talking about the policy. Policy where, for example, now if I'm shipping, I'm bringing in coffee, or I'm shipping coffee outside the country, there's a lot of facilities that are facilitating that, because it has been identified by Rwanda Development Board to become a product of trade. But we haven't gotten to the level where the policy is facilitating the intellectual property trade, which I think is very important for the African market. An author or a publisher going into business and understanding that intellectual property could be a product tomorrow that would lead to, a lot of money actually. Then maybe if I was to also talk about the issue of transportation, when Wendy is speaking for her, she has Mombasa next door that is able to at least give her books from UK. But for me, I have to struggle twice, because it has to come to Mombasa. I don't have any port. If books come through Mombasa or Dar es Salaam, they will have to be transported again. Kenya charges books, I think, on, they charge VAT. We don't have VAT on books because it's not a product actually. For me, I feel like every time you talk about books, everyone is like, a product, taxes. But there's a lot of effort that is happening right now in terms of, making the book sector a little bit trading. So we are still struggling in terms of shipping. Then, of course, the purchasing power. That one we cannot, when the inflation is kicking in, it means that there are so many people who are going to make decisions not to buy books. not because they don't want to, but because, you know, the purchasing power is not there in actual sense. So, well, I think those are some of the, you know, things that are a little bit, you know, different when compared to me. The francs is losing its value every day. So the books I used to buy in the UK, for example, at £1, I would pay 11,000. Now I'm paying 16,000. So it means it's almost 50% of the book. I was looking into our books from UK, I think for the Cambridge books. We used to bring them at a cost of something like £25. Now it is at £50 because of transportation and logistics, and then the exchange rate that has skyrocketed from 2020. So we are having a lot of all those challenges: the transportation, the inflation, the lack of reading culture, not having a financial product that would support the book businesses, and also the young industry in Rwanda of publishing, because we are talking about Kenya and Nigeria that has been publishing for maybe 30 to 50 years, I guess. But for us, we are talking about after the 1994 genocide. The first publishing house that was established in Rwanda was established in 1995. And that was just a Kinyarwanda children NGO that came from Switzerland set up. So most of the publishers actually came up recently. So when I'm talking about books, I'm referring to children books. We are lacking a lot of books in terms of, literature books. I think Wendy knows. We buy at least 60% of adult and young adult books come from Kenya and UK. That is our biggest market for now. And we know that is also a content challenge, because if I bring just the Diary of Wimpy Kids to Kigali, what am I expecting? So there's a lot of challenges around book selling, but I think we can handle it. Africans have a way of dealing with things that are bigger than them. So that's why we are here.
Yeah, that's a very hopeful way to put it. So just before I come to you, Sewela, so just a quick appeal that we have 1 hour for this conversation, and we've done about 30 minutes, and we still have some questions to go through. So if we can just keep our answers as concise as possible, that would be really appreciated. So Sewela, what can you add to everything that the other speakers have raised regarding challenges around procuring books?
Look, a lot of the challenges have been elaborated on, but South Africa has a slightly more mature industry as well. So I don't stock books directly myself abroad. There's distributors who do that on my behalf, but they're facing the same challenges of increased, the exchange rate. Books take a longer lead time to arrive now. Since COVID, we find that they focus more on print on demand versus just sending stuff to us and seeing how it goes. So customers can wait 5 to 6 weeks for a book now, which was something unheard of before. So and because a lot of the books we stock are easily available locally, so the challenges now is more around, as a small indie bookshop, fighting for stock amongst the big chains who have a much bigger negotiating power, who can change the price of a book. If a book comes out now, they get a lot more of the chunk, because, the publishers will prioritize them because they have the scale nationally. So they will get the chunk, and then versus you as a small indie who still has only one branch. So you have to be clever around how do you keep yourself, relevant to get a bunch of, and because they'll run a promotion and then they sink the price. But as an independent publisher, independent bookseller, you would have bought it, at a higher price because you don't have the scale. So over and above the challenges that my panelists spoke about, I think this is the one that I face the most, because you're competing with like an Exclusive Books who has 100 stores nationwide. There are others, Bargain Books, Reader's Warehouse, all of that. So but then luckily, as Gasana Mutesi said, you know, you have to be clever about how do you keep yourself relevant in a context like that.
Thank you, Sewela. So my third question is about price points, right? So what strategies do you employ to keep your bookstore profitable and sustainable given the economic realities in Africa? And how do you handle pricing where the cost of books can be prohibitive for many readers? Doctor, I'm going to begin with you because I think you first mentioned pricing. So how do you navigate that challenge?
I think in terms of pricing, in terms of pricing, it's still a learning process for us, figuring out how to ensure that we're able to price our books, appropriately, where readers will be able to afford the books in the light of other competing priorities that they have. People have to eat, people have to clothe themselves, pay fees, pay their rents, and then reading, if they're reading for leisure, is just something that they pay for fun, right? So it's like a tough act, it's a balancing act in terms of ensure that you're able to cover your operating costs, and then also ensure that you're also able to keep the business going, because essentially it's a business. And so if it's not making sense, if you probably just change the status to a charity and then depend on grants to be able to live. But if you're running it strictly as a business, then it has to be profitable. Thankfully, I think that readers are some readers are understanding the inflationary pressures are not only on books, they are pretty much on everything, on rent, on transportation, and they're not peculiar to the global south alone, right? So paperback used to be £9.99 in the UK, but now it's £10.99 on the average, and they've also had to adjust prices to reflect inflationary pressure, right? So I think it's educating the customers. When people come in and say, "Oh, I bought this book 2 years ago at 4,000 naira, now you're selling at 12,000 naira," you will have to spend some time educating them to say, "You bought your 4,000 in naira years ago, 2 years ago, the dollar or the pound was 500 naira or 600 naira. Today it's 2,300. So they are also understanding, right? They can also see how much they are also charging if they are in business, or how much their rent and transportation expenses are also going in there. So I think it's a balancing act, and it's just really figuring out. There are times when you would have to slash the price, just to ensure that you turn over stock, because there's no point carrying stock for too long. The distance between Nigeria and the UK, where you have to ship it back, is just prohibitive, right? You can't even think of at best, if you plead enough, they'll ask you to destroy overstock, but you're stuck with them. So you have to figure out a way to at least recover your capital. And then I think the last point I will stress is around pricing enough to be able to hedge against FX fluctuations, right? Last year and the year before, we booked tens of millions of naira or billions of naira in FX losses, because you had priced the books months ago, because you got them credit, and when the invoices are due, they're 200, 300 naira more than the price that you used to price the book, even though you sold them, and so you have to book those losses, right? So you're then using a forward rate to be able to ensure that you are hedging against FX fluctuations. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Dr. Sewela.
Pricing also is a learning experience for me as well. Most of the booksellers here, because there's that distribution network, they're a recommended price that they list a book for you to sell at, and most adhere to that, and promotion going on. So at first, when I get a book, I'll keep it at that level, but of course later there could be promotions. When I just didn't really care about who I am, I had to buy everything cash. Now at least you have a credit line that you can negotiate at a discount at which you get your books at, and then that affects how you price. Yeah, it's still a concern depending on the share of wallet, as my panelists have said. But yeah, I'm seeing more and more books getting more expensive. In South Africa, books before a paperback could be 250, but now they're starting at 300. And even goes high up to 350, which is a concern also for an economy like ours, which is hit a slump. So yeah, it's a take it by ear for how the market with the promotion, but at least we have a set recommended price where booksellers are encouraged to sell, because consumers compete. I see them walking in the shop. Happened to my network.
Okay, yeah, back on.
yeah, just to wrap up to say, I've seen consumers walking in the shop and comparing online, with which is takealot.com, which is an equivalent of an Amazon. So sometimes you have to watch their pricing as well, but at least we have a set price as recommended by publishers.
Right, that's very interesting. Wendy?
Yes, the question of price is an ongoing headache, and as much as you feel for consumers, I think there's so much you can do, because your survival is also as important. Yeah, I mean, you need to set a price that you'll be able to run the business and pay your bills and the overheads and all of that. So what we've done is try to move up beyond price. Yeah, try to move beyond price by emphasizing community events, connection, the human element. The other thing is also tap into different market pockets. I think I mentioned earlier we have pop-up markets. We also go outside the store. So very often you'll find us in craft markets. So we are moving beyond the price, because there's not much we can do about that. Our hands are tied, the cost is what it is. So we have built the brand to be just more than this is a commodity I'm buying. That this is a Somanami experience. So somebody feels better and good, and they can justify all the other reasons why they want to spend money with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy. Gasana, can you share your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's common. I always say that it's common, but I think Wendy has touched something that is very important. Going out of the bookstore and creating communities. We have bookstore, book talk, people. We have used social media influencers to push people into the bookstore, but also to push people on books. We create events that go out of Kigali even, and we move to the provinces to make the books available and accessible, because we believe that once we go there, sometimes we have seen where we have gone to a province and reduced the price of the book, but because someone has paid that cost, we have been looking for partnerships with different people where, for example, we move one kind of a book and then we move it with promotions, but also with grants, and sometimes with the funding that is not a direct funding, but some institutions buying maybe a number of copies for a certain group of people to make sure that you have. But I think pricing is still an issue, especially in my market, because sometimes there's a it's a business. You have to run it as a business. But again, you have to look at the community you're serving. So we really price depending. There's a minimum price that we can go for, but there's also that kind of flexibility into the pricing for one community to another. So we have the publishers who come and say, okay, we want to partner to sell our books, but we are giving you, for example, 50%, and we want you to sell the book at a 30% discount at this specific category of people. So there's a lot of things that influence the pricing, but I think generally it's the normal challenges that are around the book sector, like inflation that affects, of course, the francs, and then people saying, we don't have a lot of money to buy books, so we can't invest in money. But do we have people who are constant clients who know that books are a valuable commodity to have in their homes? Yeah.
I'm glad that we've touched on building communities, because that's exactly where I'm going next with my questions. And so I'm just curious, what role do community initiatives such as reading clubs or local events play in engaging readers in your regions? And do you think it's your responsibility as a bookseller to promote reading, especially if it helps your bottom line?
Sure. You want me to go first?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. Because I'm the one who I think sells most on communities. We drive our business really on the communities. We started our first book talk in 2015, and it has been going from that time. when we started the book talk, it was because some people had requested for a space in our bookstore to come and start reading. So we're like, yeah, let's start. Then we started mostly, the most readers were touching actually the motivational books. So most probably people who come from churches or who want self-help books. Then later it grew to literature. Literature lovers started to come together and meet. So why is it important for communities like Rwanda, where the reading culture is not groomed? It's because that, some of those people will be turned into clients because they start by coming to read, by listening to avid readers, and then they end up becoming readers. And I think that is one way of actually communities of readers, communities of book lovers are the ones that later become, your marketing people. They would just be like, hey, we have this bookstore we go to. You need a book, a children's book, go there. You need your book, go there. We have had a lot of recommendations from just people to people than, making money more than actually the normal marketing professional way of doing it. So communities build a client base, but also communities build the reading culture. And I think it depends on the market niche of every bookshop. But I think for us, it was more of availing books to the community. So we had to depend on the community. The second thing is that communities enhance our visibility in a way that we might not be able to, to comprehend. Every person, I've seen people in the Northern Province where we went like a year ago, recommending people who came from London or Canada, from the diaspora, to come and buy books at our bookstore. So those people, we had not reached them on social media or by using social media influencers, but we touch them by being into the community where they visit. Their parents, I remember there's a parent who sent the daughter was saying, I want Kinyarwanda children books to take back to Canada. And then the mother was like, there are people normally who come to this community to read for kids. I'll give you their number. And she bought books. So I think communities a good way to go. And yes, bookshops should be promoting the reading culture. Otherwise, in a place, especially where you're struggling to make readers, that might be the only option that you might be having. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Gasana. Wendy, what do you think about using communities as a tool to selling books?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think for me, the chicken and egg in this question is that the community happened before the bookstore. Yeah. So like I mentioned, we were in a book club. So already we are coming from a level of where book lovers, we're readers, and therefore, the trade aspect came in. So from day one, we've been very dedicated in terms of nurturing reading communities. We purposely designed the stores as social spaces. So we don't have, in both of the stores, we don't have shelving in the middle. So you only have shelving around the wall, and in the middle is a sitting setup. So the idea is that people will come and spend their whole day inside the bookstore, right? And it was very confusing at first to Nairobians because they were like, is this a library or is this a bookstore? Because the typical bookstore doesn't want you hanging around much. Pick your book and just buy and go. So we've been very intentional in terms of making it very clear that we want people to interact with the books. We host a book club, a monthly book club. We also have book clubs that we support because we intimately understand the struggle of trying to run a book club without the support of the trade and providing the books that you want to read. So we have that. We also have the African Book Fair, which also started as a way to try and have a week of celebration of African storytelling. So all those aspects are very integral, mostly to our mission, and then of course, to the business end of it. yeah, but we feel very strongly about serving and interacting with the people that we live for.
Sewela, what do you think?
Yeah, community is very important. It's what my business is built on. Maybe it's same to what the colleague said about book clubs. So we have discussions on a weekly basis. The center where I'm at is quite quiet. It's not a heavy foot traffic center like a mall setup. So you have to get people in, and how we get people in is that there's a mailing list, a weekly mailing list to those people, a strong social media presence to get people seeing what we're doing. And then I think what I've been able to add is the universities in the area. So the bookshop is flanked by 2 major universities in Johannesburg. So there's pop-ups in those spaces, and schools. In South Africa, private schools have started this movement of decolonizing their content. So trying to tap into that community, because then you're guaranteed bulk sales, and you're also not haggling on price, because this is people that have that disposable income to buy a children's book of around 140 for their child.
Yeah, thank you, Sewela. Dotun?
At the risk of sounding trite, I think it's in the community something that we found out to be really critical, to individuals' brick and mortar store success, right? Book buying, book selling is now experiential, right? People want to they want to meet, they want to interact with other people, they want to discuss. I remember, giving an interview, and I said a bookseller is a therapist, right? There are days where people call me just to, they're in a foul mood, and then they're looking for something to read, and then, recommend something to them, and they start to trust your judgments. That's how you build community and connection with your customers. Some of them have gone on to be lifelong friends, right? So for us, we ensure that we have like regular events in our stores, also signings. There's some that we originate. And there's some events that others reach out to us and say, hey, you want to use your space. And at that point, we'd say, okay, well, if you're having an event in a space and we're not the ones originating it, did you just pay somebody to stipend to take care of the admin cost and the inconvenience? And some of them are happy to do that, right? We've gone beyond book selling to even doing things like book swap, right? Which a lot of people really enjoy, right? You have people with huge tomes that they bought and they read for years, and it's just gathering dust on their shelves, and they'll be happy to trade those books in, with other readers who have similar books. So they all come in on the Saturday, do that once a quarter, and then they all sit down, and it's almost like a marketplace where they are trading. I want this. If you want me to give you this, then you have to give me this other book. But that's something that we found really helpful. Also because it just helps in bringing footfall into the store, right? When people come into the store, they get to buy more. They get to buy more, because they see the physical books, and some of them are already in there to be read to, and they can't just resist the impulse to buy because they're in the store. I think the last point I'd like to stress is just they need to be really, really creative. The bookstore is a community center. It's an integral part of the community. It's really important for you to be able to reflect, your essence in just mirroring the taste of what people use. When we started out one of our Abuja outlets, we posted events as varied as Toastmasters events. We asked them to use the space for free. And that brought us like several customers and people who got to realize that we were a bookstore in that quiet part of town because they were Toastmasters members. And then when the people ask them, I'm looking for a bookstore, they are always eager to. So we hosted Toastmasters, we host open mic events in our space for young people. They come in and then it's an opportunity for them to learn their craft. Most recently, we did a book and paints. It's on our social media handle that I actually recommend everyone to check the IG handle where, we have people come into the store, they paid for it, right? To pay to, they bought the tickets and then they attempted to draw book covers. And there were videos where they were comparing, what they are drawn and then the actual book cover, which is just a way, for people to just, deepen bonds with other readers and form community. So it's really, really important to use the bookstore space as a meeting place for people, for readers, for authors. I was also really happy when I visited Sumanami's new outlet, and I realized that their shelves had rollers, where they could just move the shelves and then a place where they could have authors, and which is something that we also do back in Nigeria. So
fantastic, Dotun. So we've spoken about communities, we've talked about profitability, we've talked about dwindling reading culture and also even just availability of books that speak to the local audience that you're trying to sell to. So now let's come to our favorite, I don't know, boogeyman, the government. So can you speak to the role of government regulations, taxation, or local policies and infrastructure in shaping the book selling landscape in your region? So basically, what do you think the government should do? What changes would you like to see? I'm going to start off with Sewela, and I'm very curious about your region, Sewela, since of all the regions on the continent, South Africa has a publishing industry or a book industry that is a bit more advanced than many others. So what changes would you like to see from government and policy and infrastructure?
I think VAT is number one, so that we have VAT on books, and that just hikes up the price and also deters, the people buying for challenges we've already explored. And government is the biggest employer in this country. So if they prioritized how books are seen in the general consumer market, in helping that reading culture. And I must say they are making inroads. So it's not like they're not doing anything, but I'm saying they can still do much. So they fund a lot of NGOs that drive reading for pleasure. There's in Nalibali, Book Dash. They work with other NGOs like your Biblionefs to fund, especially at a childhood level. But at an adult level, I think just making sure that SMMEs like mine can operate much easier, not expecting us to live up to the same standards as a big established company in as far as your tax compliance, your reporting compliance, to make life much easier for a book entrepreneur. And I think Gasana also spoke about it, to make it look like something that banks could invest in growth. So I just think they could use their negotiating power to make life easier for entrepreneurs in the book space.
Thank you, Sewela. Wendy.
The question of the government always elicits a certain type of emotion, because sometimes it feels as though you are moving in spite of, or that the support and the necessary enabling is missing, and the intention especially. So for instance, the question of, so I would deal with this two ways. So one is, there's a very big distinction between the education book industry in Kenya vis-a-vis the non-education book industry. So we are in the non-education because we cater to non-curriculum readers, whether children, adults, and the likes. So for education publications and trade, the whole chain, the government is very, very involved, because they have curriculum body that is very active, and they set what is to be read and all of that. So there's incentive, there's almost like a mandatory that, parents have to buy books for school. So that trade is a very different where we play. And that comes where we play, this and because books are not tax exempt, so they suffer the 16%. They charge the 16% VAT. They inevitably become really quite expensive. The other challenge I think I see is that in the general environment of arts production, which is now the content, there hasn't been like a deliberate effort to incentivize content production, and that's not unique to books. It's also in other art forms. You see the same thing in film. So basically what that means is that we are left as net importers, and that's why we're reading from everywhere else, but the Kenyan content is, just so much. So that also means that whenever, there's FX challenges, fluctuations, we are right in the heart of it. So what I would like for government to do is, incentivize content production in the arts and not just books, because I think the same strategies would work for other art forms. And so when we have a huge volume of content production that's local, we can be able to survive all this, international trade challenges. Which is, I think that I really admire for Nigeria, because when I've been in Lagos and visited Rolling Heights, I was just amazed at, that there's a whole shelf that can feel Nigerian literature, non-fiction, fiction, I can't do that here. So much as I would want to, but there's not that much volume of work that's coming out. So yeah, taxes and an environment that produces content.
So Gasana, what would you like the government to do in Rwanda? What could change?
Well, I think we have a good government. Rwanda has a lot of things that move apart from books. Okay. But we don't have taxes, at least on books. We don't have any VAT on books. The only tax we pay is the income tax, at the end of the year, or withholding tax when you ship in books from outside Rwanda. But I think maybe the government should be able to put regulations, because we talked about piracy. If there are no, and I'm thinking that the whole of Africa, most of the African countries don't have book policy. When you don't have a book policy in place, there's a lot of things that happen within the sector that you can't control, because if I went in, downtown and found Wendy's book being copied, there's no legal ground to stand on and say, hey, you're doing a photocopy of a book and it's illegal. So we need policies that favor and defend the intellectual property. Like I said, we have the intellectual property law, but I think when it was being set up, there was a lot of ideas that generated the intellectual property law was more on the artists, songs, music and art. Right now it is being reviewed to also incorporate the books so that, piracy for books can be minimized. Then the big monster in the house is that the government of Rwanda is actually through educational books are being produced in-house, which kills the textbook industry for those who are focusing much on the selling of curriculum books. They can't, because it is dependent on the government, and the government can't sell. So there's a lot of issues around policy, but also I think there's a lot of efforts towards promoting reading culture. The government of Rwanda has put up a lot of activities. But maybe if they can be able to go deeper into, making the industry to be active by, rewarding at least authors, putting up systems that would support the authors to exist, book selling, the whole business really of books to have regulations, but also incentivization.
Right. Thank you so much. And so we're going to just power through to my next question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on digital platforms, right? So has the rise of digital platforms and online retail affected physical bookstores in your region? Have you adopted e-commerce or other digital tools to complement your in-store sales? I personally know that I've bought a lot of African books just online. I didn't have to go to a physical bookstore. So I'm very curious how you manage that, or if you participate in that in your various businesses and initiatives. So Gasana.
Thank you so much, Joki. I think digital. I remember my first experience with the digital content was during COVID, because we were not supposed to leave the homes. And that time we had just launched a platform to supply books. So people would go online, make their orders and supply them to we supply them. However, Rwanda is becoming a hub for the ICT, and we are moving fast with 35. Actually, 60% of our generation being under the age of 25. You can understand that we need the digital platforms. So there's a lot of initiatives that are going on that we have been doing. We haven't started the Amazon type, but we've been doing, online ordering of hard copies, not digital content. However, our books as a publishing house, most of them are into digital formats. So people can access them through a platform that is not ours, that we have decided to work with. Because I think most of the times also, you need to understand that you can do everything on your own. And we are also looking into other online, platforms that are coming in so that we can work with them. But you know that also digital laws and digital policies are also a little bit, dependent on each country. So we haven't really started to sell the digital content in terms of the books we don't own, the books we don't have the copyright. We are still doing a lot of promotions online. We are still doing deliveries. People don't have to come to our bookstore. They can go online and make an order, and then we deliver hard copies, not necessarily digital copies. But yes, I think we need to move fast and try to see how to make the digitalization of our content. So I think that's what I can say for now.
Thank you so much. Dotun, I do know that you have a digital storefront at Roving Heights. So the question was basically, how do you think given that we now have a lot of digital platforms and online retail, so how has that affected you running a physical bookstore there in Nigeria, and have you adopted any e-commerce or digital tools to implement your in-store sales?
Yeah, thanks, Kelechi. So we're very long on our online footprints. Even though we don't sell ebooks, we don't sell audiobooks. I still think that the markets on the continent for those formats are pretty overrated. And I stand to be corrected, right? So when I see people come in and then they say, "Oh, you're selling physical books. Why can't you sell, like, this day I prefer to read Audible, I prefer to read audio games." So I pretty much laugh them off to say, like, how many
So I think something has happened to your network. So Stella,
No, I wanted to laugh because I get that question all the time, that what he said about, oh, why are you guys still doing physical books? The internet penetration on the continent, though it's good, but people don't prefer to use it for reading a book. They prefer to scroll on social media, to connect with family. So we don't sell ebooks either, but we do have an online storefront, and that's mainly for people who are in outlying areas in still nationally, who just want to get access to the books. So digital mainly comes in for promotion, for community, but in as far as monetizing it for that e-storefront, it's still a big challenge because I'm competing with like big chains that are competing on price. So that's why I go back to that point of community. But I see Adetan is back.
Yeah, Adedatun, we lost you for a bit there. So you were talking about
apologies, yes, I was saying about the outsized impression that a lot of people have of the audiobook. The impression that the people have of the audiobook and the digital formats market. I mean, from what I've seen, the data points I've seen, I don't think the addressable market is huge enough to support business. That's and I stand to be corrected. But we leverage the internet a lot to be able to get books into the hands of readers. Like people order books on the website, and we deliver. They're able to track. We're able to delivered thanks to partnerships with like third-party logistic partners. We're still tracking and following the other formats, the interest in other formats. I know that in the early 2000s when the ebook came on the scene, there was palpable fear amongst booksellers that it was going to be the death of the physical tactile book. But so far, physical books still continue to sell, outsell other formats. And one of the things I see among younger people, the younger demographic in Nigeria, is they warm up to digital PDF copies or bootlegged audio ones, because oftentimes the physical ones are priced out of their reach. And as they continue to the rise on the income ladder, they then get to the point where they feel like, oh, I spend the greater part of my day staring at the screen to make a living. If I want to do something for fun, I don't want to be like be reading a screen, reading on the phone or reading on the Kindle. And I know people who have Kindle formats, and then they still prefer to have the physical books because just that look on the shelf, it's really, really appealing. I have an Audible, and I don't think I've ever finished. Amazon charges me, whatnot every month, but I don't think I've ever listened to a complete book, right? Finish the book on Audible, but I read 3 or 4 books in a month, right? So I think it's a preference thing, but from the data I have, I don't think that there's a sizable addressable market for those formats. I just also want to quickly add before I yield the mic, the point around what should be our expectation of government. I guess myself and Mutesi are probably like the only, the markets. We are probably the only folks in the market where there are no VAT on books, which is good, but that necessarily hasn't translated into sales. I think that Nairobi and South Africa, those 2 markets, they push more books than we ever do in Nigeria, even though we're the largest. In terms of population on the continent, right? My prescriptions would be that government should get out of the way. Because I think that they're just in the less barrier hurdle to growth. So the starting point, I think, should be just ensuring that government deliver growth and development in our economy, so that the question of books is a question of disposable income. If people have the disposable income, in the UK, maybe the average paperback is less than it's less than the cost of working the many job per hour, right? But it's completely different in Nigeria. An average paperback is about 30% of the minimum wage, right? So I think that the starting point should be just investing and then tackling some of the economic issues we have, so that people have more disposable income. And then even when they don't read, they can buy books for their children. At least, right? Some people say I don't read, but my kids read, right? I think that's like a starting point and a serious bulwark for our industry.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. I think that the jury is still out on. I mean, I enjoy audiobooks because I'm a slow reader and kind of just makes everything faster. But generally speaking, paperback books still outsell audio and ebooks. I think ebooks are just even at the bottom of that entire thing. So yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for your insights. Wendy, would you like to share anything from?
Yeah, very briefly. Yes, I think digital. I've always been a believer in following where the customer is going, and so as much as we currently have an online store, most customers use it as catalog browsing. So we have a lot of traffic on the website, but if you look at the conversion, it's always below 1%. So Nairobians or Kenyans have a very peculiar behavior. So they'll go to the website, browse, take screenshots, come to the store with a screenshot, and say, "This is what I wanted," which I love because, again, probably they value the human interaction more than just getting a product anonymously. So that's been our experience in terms of translating sales online. We have a very active digital presence, but also that's mostly on a marketing perspective and not very much of a sales perspective. It's a way of us showing what we have there and gaining trust from customers. Because as a new brand, as a brand that's yet to become a household name, you have to be, believable, and people, realize that you are the real deal, and that because we have a lot of cons who, fish from the internet and post books and, all those kinds of Nairobi's underbelly, but, that's a story for another day. So it's also a way for us to show our authenticity. But that being said, the conversation on ebooks, I wouldn't say never ever, because from the interactions with readers, I'm just noticing a trend of multi-platform use. So you'll have people reading an audiobook alongside the physical book, and that's just because of the nature of life. So if you're commuting, then you want to plug in the book, and then when you get home, continue reading it on the physical format, right? So for people that have very busy lives and would still want to sneak in reading during the day, so the multi-consumption is there. And it's also a question that lingers in my mind, like what would that look like? Because the requirements for doing physical trade on books and digital books is a whole different ball game. But it's still like an open tab in my brain. Yeah, so I'm eager to explore that.
Right. Thank you so much. So let's talk about networks, right, between publishers and booksellers. And I think a lot of this, so many things in this conversation we've been having have touched on that, but I'd love to hear a bit more, just fleshing it out a bit more. So what should be done to create stronger networks between local publishers and booksellers in your regions and across the continent? You did mention at some point that there is an excellent road network in pretty much all of East Africa. I don't know if we can say the same for West Africa. Really curious what Southern African road network is like. So what can we do in terms of collaboration between local publishers and booksellers in your regions? Sewela, let me hear from you.
Okay. No, the road network in South Africa is also excellent, and even with shipping stuff overnight by air is good, but then the price, that's going to affect your price. So rather plan much better in doing that. I think forums like this, I mean, today I learned of fellow booksellers and I've been looking them up to see, so that's an excellent opportunity to start trying to find that. Earlier on, we spoke about how authors themselves, having an excellent relationship with authors is the main thing, because they will tell you who is traveling between which country, and then you can send books with them. I mean, for Zimbabwe, for Zambia, I'm always getting books via authors who go and stand at a bus station, and they will know somebody that could send books to me. And then events, attending book fairs as a bookseller is key for me. In South Africa, that's how I meet people. That's how I meet publishers. And then what I saw grew the business was then when I even shared what I was reading. Sometimes as a book, you don't want to be like the celebrity business person behind your business, but then unfortunately in Africa, it's still people are more buying your story than actually what you're selling, because you're bringing that inspiration around why are you even interested in. So I saw a growth in what I do when I started like doing the facilitation, doing the book reviews, being a judge on book prizes. Those kind of things is what then increase your network and your community, and being open to forums like this. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sewela. Dotun, and then I'll come to Mutesi and Wendy.
I think to the question of the collaboration that is needed between players in the book value chain, publishers, and we need to have regular meets where we provide feedback to to the local publishers. And one of the things that I don't see happening in our own market. It's just that sessions where bookstore or a bookseller would have a sit down with a bookstore to say, I'm about to bring this book. What do you think? What do you think of the cover, right? Because you are the ultimate touch points with the customer, right? The customers tell you, oh, this cover is shitty. I'm not, pardon my French, like I'm not going to buy because I don't like the cover. And that's just feedback for a publisher. So like, where did you get this from? I've had moments where a publisher told me the author designed the cover. And I laughed, I was, my remark was like, you're a business. Why would you allow the author design the cover when, you put your capital behind this, right? And I think that those kinds of feedback are very, very important too, for the publishers. I remember speaking at a panel last year, and then one publisher was, griping about how bookstores were in pain. And it was really embarrassing for me as a bookseller to say, well, we make our obligations to publishers at our when due. And I said, look, it's really, really important for us to have regular meets where we're all sitting down and talking about like the challenges of our sector, like sharing ideas around like pricing, ideas around like the quality of your books, ideas around like the marketing spend, which is like one of the biggest challenges I see for local publishers, right? They expect you as a bookstore to do the work of marketing for them. There's no budget for marketing, right? And these are pain points that the booksellers can provide to publishers to say like, look, we're a bookstore, we're not a warehouse, right? If you're not promoting your books, there's only so much you can do, and your books will just be gathering dust, on the shelves, right? So those feedbacks are really, really important, right? And I think that that's a role that Canex can also support in, facilitating those meets from time to time. One of the best experiences I've had as a bookseller in 3 years was going for the Sharjah, booksellers conference and just meeting with, other booksellers and just sharing ideas with them. Conversations around things like, discounts around, freight forwarder, who do you use to freight your books? Those are things that are beneficial when we sit down and we share those ideas. And I think, having regular meetup between publishers and booksellers would help to, deepen those conversations.
Thank you so much. That's Wendy, and then I'll come to Gasana.
Yes, thank you. And at the fault of repeating what my fellow panelists have said, I think the crux rests on community and us keeping in touch with each other. That's why I was very excited to be part of this panel. So whether with fellow booksellers or with publishers, but I think I would like to make a special emphasis on, publishers that are not on the African continent. I see a lot of lack of investment, lack of regard for African markets, in the sense of maybe allocating marketing budgets or going out of their way to, enable distribution, and the same way. So basically, it's always like an afterthought or not there at all. Previously, and I'm saying this because I think we're a significant market. And just by mere fact that, we are trading partners, if there's a way that, we need to be part of the agenda, that would also go a long way in terms of assisting, the traders to be able to weather the specific challenges. I want to say that is not the case for everybody, because I know a couple of publishers that in Penguin do go out of their way to set special export prices or Africa prices, especially when a book is by an African, or so the book is coming back home, so they will set a special price so that the book is very accessible. So those kinds of concessions and considerations would go a long way, especially with the big publishers who are able to do a lot more. They can go a lot. They have some leeway, just so that we can have this trade thrive. So that's all I'd like to add to that.
Thank you so much. Kasana.
I think everything has been said. Just to say that we need internal organization, local, first of all, coming together as booksellers or even as publishers, having publishers associations and booksellers associations that are stronger, because then we can be able to leverage the opportunities in other regions. If Rwanda has a booksellers association, Kenya has one, then we can, look at the ways of collaboration, especially when it comes to publishers and booksellers. Then, keeping our eyes really open for collaboration. Collaboration is a very strong, not really becoming competitors, publishers understanding that booksellers are not their competition, because I think that is very rampant in the markets, because publishers want to sell to the same community the booksellers are selling, and sometimes they offer discounts that they offer to the booksellers. So looking at the ways of collaborating to be able to meet the market needs would make both the booksellers and the publishers grow at the same time. So I think collaboration.
Thank you very much, Kasana. So this was really, really very insightful. So my final question is really around last words, right? So what are your final words on how to build stronger book selling networks in Africa? I'm going to begin from you, Kasana, move to Dotun, and then Sewela and Wendy.
Thank you so very much. First of all, I think the starting point was here. To me, meeting fellow booksellers and talking about the challenges and opportunities we have. I have learned that Sewela is in South Africa. I now have someone from Nigeria. I have known Wendy. So the more we meet, the more we create trust, the more we can do business together. Because I think business is about trust and also looking at opportunities that are available. The second thing is maybe to try to do more of this. We know that book selling is not an art. It's not yet a business that is lucrative in Africa. So we need to create more networks like this to meet and share experience and discuss and, share contact. And, if I know someone now that is in South Africa, because the world has become a global village, that is looking for books, I know I'm going to recommend, them to Sewela. If I know someone who's looking for books in Nairobi, I know Somanami is the place to go. So I think, networking, collaboration, and also coming together and sharing our challenges and also learning from each other is what we need to do and keep doing it more often.
Fantastic. Dotun?
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of sounding repetitive, I think I'm also going to tow the sentiment of Mutesi around trust building, and I think that that's really, really important, within the community for us to be able to build trust, right? So I've been to Somanami, and Wendy and Philip have also been to outlets, and we're having conversations around doing business together and starting from informally first, trying to understand the market. So if I need a book from Nairobi, trying to see the cheapest option to be able to get the books into the country, right? And I think it's also something that we should explore in other markets, South Africa as well, when they are requesting for books. And of course, trust building is really, really important to be able to get to that point. And I hope that the much wanted African Continental Free Trade Agreement will make things easier for us to do trade within the continent. I just got back from Dar es Salaam this morning, and a section of my bag was packed with books published by Nkuki Nayota, a famed independent publishing house in Dar es Salaam, right? And it was the person I could think of, to the point where I think we will get to where we'll probably be sending the books down via KQ to Lagos. But of course, this thing starts small. I know the challenges are myriad. But I don't think we should give up. Our communities best served when we share information, when we share ideas. If you're doing something that has worked in your market, be willing to share. If you have a freight forwarder, for instance, who is giving you like an out of the world deal, it's also what's recommending. I mean, we're not competitors; we work in different markets, and I don't think that we've seized the market enough in Nigeria to be able to say I'm going to Rwanda or I'm going to Nairobi. Actually, there's still a whole lot of so I think we should still continue to double down on collaboration.
Thank you so much, Adedotun. Sewela.
Yeah, a lot of my thoughts have been said. Maybe just to encourage fellow panelists on the line. I know it's not an easy one. Most of us, you'll have a main job, and this is like a passion project. So just keep at it. And a huge thing around sustainability, because you're an individual, everything is in your head, is in your computer. Maybe work on systems where there's ability for someone to take over should something happen to you. Making sure that the systems that other people that step in can easily replicate what you're trying to do, which is often a common thing, especially on the continent, because we are first like generation trying to establish something. So while we're building, let's also think of sustainability and that key man thing. If something happens to me, what happens to Book Circle Capital? That's what I'm always thinking about.
Thank you so much, Sewela. That was a very important point. And I'm sure that in a subsequent conversation, that's something that we could talk more about. Wendy.
Okay, I think I have the pleasure of speaking last.
Yeah.
So allow me to just make this a Thanksgiving speech, and first to KNX Book Factory for putting this panel together and reaching out to each of us individually and bringing us on the same table. Building these kinds of relationships with each other is invaluable, and I'm always also eager to help locally published Kenyan authors be able to go into other markets. And these kinds of relationships with other booksellers are very critical because Dotun will tell you that I've been trying to peddle a certain Kenyan author to him, and we're trying to work out what that would look like in terms of supplies and everything. So so thank you to KNX. Thank you to you, Kalechi, for the thoughtful questions and, for really just opening up the conversation. And to each of my fellow panelists, Asanteni Sana. Thank you, Sewela. It's nice to make your acquaintance. I saw that when I was looking through your social media that we have somebody in common, Zuki Swabana, who is an excellent book mule. He's always bringing me books from SA. So that's a good thing to note. And also it's good to meet again. I don't know, he was just in Nairobi not too long ago. And so I'm glad to see that he made it back home. And it's also nice to see you again, Mutesi. So thank you for this forum. I have my notebook scribbled with ideas on what to do. I like the association bit because I think we can really go far together. So I will pursue that on a local level, and then we can see what that looks like continentally. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Wendy. That was very thoughtful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sewela. Thank you, Mutesi. Thank you, Adedotun. Thank you again, Wendy. This was a very insightful conversation. I enjoyed it. I think that it's important that we continue to have these conversations with booksellers. Often on the continent, we're always talking about publishers and writers and awards and prizes. There isn't, we need to have more conversations about distribution, about how people get to read. One of my favorite points from this session, and there were so many favorite points, was just looking at how the foundation is that if you don't have enough people reading or who are taught to read from childhood, then it means that the market is difficult, because typically reading is kind of tough. It's something that if you don't learn to do it early, it just becomes boring. You can learn to do cinema later in life, but with reading it's better. So we need to also see how the government can, bridge that educational gap, make our people way more educated, love books more, because these are the markets that we're going to sell to now and in the future. Thank you so much. It was very great, learning about what the publishing and book selling industry looks like in all of these regions. And I'm going to go away from this process thinking about everything we have discussed here. It was lovely to meet all of you. Thank you so much, Kinex, for putting this together. Osas, if you're still there, over to you.
Thank you all for joining today's insightful session. It was a lot more interactive than we could have hoped for. Thank you so much. I want to say a special thank you to our wonderful panelists for sharing their knowledge and experiences on navigating the book trade in Africa. Your perspectives have truly shed light on the challenges and opportunities in this industry. I hope we can continue to work together to strengthen the book trade across the continent. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you at future Kinex Book Factory events. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.